Did you know that it's the 39th episode in the series? That's 390 obscure games covered. Crazy. Anyway, let's see what I've prepared for today together. Legend of the Sword is one of those very special games that are hard to explain and much easier understood when played. But I will try anyway. It's this classic parser-based fantasy adventure with some very little RPG elements to it. It takes place in the fantasy kingdom of Antar, which for eons carried on in peace and prosperity, defended by the magical power of its two mythical artifacts, sword and shield. When the game takes place, however, Antar is in a different place. It has been invaded by the evil Suzar and hordes of his aggressive warriors, and there's seemingly no force left anywhere to defeat him, unless the legend speaks true and combined power of the legendary sword and shield could do it. Well, we won't know until we try, so you and 5 other adventurers volunteer to find the enchanted artifacts and defeat the evil tyrant. And this is where the game starts, with a ship dropping all of you on an uncharted Antar island. But before it does, the game asks you where you'd like to land, giving you 3 options. And while it may not seem important at first, it will keep throwing those decision moments, both big and small, at you all throughout, allowing you to craft your own unique adventure with weight of each of the choices influencing its outcome. Most actions and interactions with objects and characters are described in detail in the text output window, with at least 2-3 lines of atmospheric text to each, adding a lot of flavor to your quest. The game uses a text parser, which I despise with a passion of all Olympic athletes ever being that point short of getting the bronze medal, knowing that they're good, but not good enough to get to the podium time after time again, with their frustration growing exponentially with each competition they participate in and fail to perform good enough. Same with parser-based adventures. Each next, despite how well it's implemented, annoys me more and there's nothing I can do about it. It's all in my head. That said, in Legend of the Sword, at least the traversal can be done with icons. It may not be a lot, but it's something. The location graphics and the map that you'll get to experience in the game may not be the highest quality out there, but for 1988 adventure game and EGA display, they're decent. And most importantly, they elevate this otherwise text-based heavy adventure to a bit higher standard. Liberty or Death is a top-down turn-based historical strategy depicting conflict between American rebels and the British Empire during American Revolutionary War, and whichever side you pick, you'll be given a chance to choose your leader out of available 3: Charles Lee, Artemas Ward or George Washington for Continental Army, and Henry Clinton, Thomas Gage or William Howe for the British Royal Navy. Liberty or Death is one of the very few games that quite accurately portrayed how much of an underdog American side was in the War for Independence, how huge of an effort it was, and how much strategic brilliance they had to utilize to win eventually. So, if you decide to play as rebels, you'll have a hell of a challenge cut out for yourself, but also a very rewarding experience if you manage to win. Picking Royal Navy may be an easier and better option for a new player, but ultimately not as fulfilling and fun if you win. Overall, playing as American side brings in more varied, challenging and feature-packed scenario, rather than straight-up brute-forcing your superiority and will as Brits. American side has to balance warfare with politics, seeking support from more and more states and external nations alike, while Royal side can just spit out more and more units. Within reason, but that's what it mainly does. The difference in playstyle between the two nations is monumental and it guarantees at least 2 full and uniquely feeling playthroughs. Though, same as with all other good strategies, many more are more likely. Combat encounters can take place on land and water, and the graphics, while simple, are easy to read and understand, so they never get in the way of tactics. Should you play Liberty or Death then? If you like strategies or are into history, then definitely. Otherwise, it may feel a bit too utilitarian, too blunt, and you may very well start your strategy adventure with something better, like Sid Meier's Civilization for instance. Lucky Luke is a classical side-scrolling action platformer based on the famous Belgian comic book series, and it places you in the shoes of our titular protagonist. It plays mostly like any other game in the genre, with you going from left to right, defeating hundreds upon hundreds of enemies, mainly bad cowboys, jailbreakers and hostile natives, and collecting various pickups. Stuff like bullets for your revolver, dynamite or sheriff's stars. Each level is differently themed and will allow you to experience familiar from comic book locations like forts, western towns, jails, mines, trains or even a saloon. Each of these will have its own unique objective required for completion too, like freeing a bank director, collecting gold nuggets to exchange for nitroglycerin, or building a totem for Apaches, and they will often end with a boss fight too. These usually are one of the Dalton brothers whose capturing is your overarching mega objective for the entire game. so Avril, William, Jack and Joe Dalton all have to be defeated to be precise. Between these standard levels, however, you'll partake in some thematically fitting Western arcade sequences. So you'll horse chase the criminal brothers, you'll run away from the tornado, navigate a raft, take part in wrestling challenge or bottle shooting, to name a few. What you should take out from all of this is that Lucky Luke is rather varied and should keep you entertained all the way through. The game's presentation is great. It looks as if it was torn straight from the pages of the comic book, and even though it uses a low-resolution display, no detail is spared either on the characters or backgrounds, and it's a pleasure to witness in motion. I mean, I wouldn't expect any less in 1997, but I've been burnt and disappointed before, so it's worth pointing out that Lucky Luke delivers. On all fronts, no less. Some stages will feature very basic environmental puzzling, like figuring out how to use makeshift trampoline made out of log, plank and a huge piece of hay hanging above it all, and the likes. But these are never difficult to work out and only add to the comic book atmosphere of it all. If you like platformers, you're gonna love Lucky Luke. And if you don't, try it out anyway, it plays great and looks amazing. Blam blam blam, kapow! Boom, kerplank, blam! And once again, kapow! Machinehead is a post-apocalyptic sci-fi hovercraft-based 3D first-person shooter, and it doesn't take itself too seriously, opting for a less realistic plot and betting on a pure fun factor to carry the gameplay, kinda like I do in real life. I'm having fun throughout it all, never treating myself as this all-knowing and respect-deserving being just because I've lived for a while. Nah, I'm nearly the same I was 20 years ago and I love it. And so does Machinehead. It actually succeeds at that too, keeping a healthy distance to itself. I mean, I'm getting off topic, so let me explain more or less what it's all about. You're Kimberly Stride, a beautiful, smart and most importantly cool-named scientist turned savior of the world in the making. All because your assistant betrayed you and the mutated evil DNA you worked on has gone berserk and is eating up the whole world. Now, if you think about it, really think about it, like give it your best or at least close to it, how would you explain DNA eating up everything? How is that even possible? Never mind. Game logic seems to be the best answer to any and all questions of the kind. So, you jump into this futuristic armed two-detective hovercraft and head off to travel through various infected lands, killing anything and everything that stands in your way. There are 4 of these lands, each divided into 4 smaller stages, and all of these have their own objectives to complete. You'll face many different monstrosities straight out of your worst nightmare there, so stuff like giant flies and huge spiders are nothing special in Blam, and just a few of many overgrown or hideous creatures for you to combat and kill. There are some installations to destroy as well, but naturally they don't look as terrifying. Weapons have limited ammo, and while you may have different ones like guns, missiles, flamethrowers, grenades or heavy artillery, it's worth keeping in mind how many bullets you've left to save the best weapons for the biggest challenges only. And while all of it may seem a bit tedious, just go there and kill everything type of a game. The variety of enemies, interesting level design and fun shooting mechanics make Blam Machinehead a pretty fun title to sink some hours in. One thing that may annoy some are a bit long levels that take a while to go through, so if you're not a fan of that, it may not be a game for you. MOT is a tale about a boy and his monster, MOT, and it's based on an old Spanish comic book. It's also a mess to both play and explain. I'm gonna try, but you gotta give me a break with this one, it's something else. Anyway, you're sad boy and you have a monster living in your closet. You know, like all boys do. Worst of all, he can teleport and make mess everywhere. And he does it all the freaking time. Remember how it was when your monster used to do it when you were a kid? You kept trying to explain to your parents that it wasn't you and they acted as if you were lying. Like they wouldn't remember having a monsters of their own years before. Or was it just me? Anyway, same situation here. So, MOT is there with you and he does what these do. Until one day, that is, when suddenly he's gone, and if you were grown up, it would be understandable, cause all of the monsters leave us when we grow up. Nope, MOT just disappeared without a trace. And when you get a distress call explaining what happened, you decide that you have to save him. Cause as much of a trouble as he is, he's also your monster. MOT in reality is a collection of 3 mini-games, all rather bad in my opinion and not worth your time. But whatever, let's try to tackle them somehow. In first, MOT is running around the house destroying stuff and you have to clean up after him so that your parents wouldn't see him. There are 3 health bars in this mode, one for MOT's hunger, one for house's condition and one for your sanity. And naturally all have to be kept leveled. It's a rather difficult and unsatisfying game. The other 2 are not much better, I'm afraid. Unlike the first side view one, these are top-down and see you both going upwards defeating enemies. In first, you have to kill a certain number of them to complete the level, second carries on until you die. Now, granted, I've not played MOT for years by now, but I remember being disappointed, giving it just a minute per game or so and not liking it at all. If I however misremembered or misunderstood something about MOT, feel free to correct me, cause I may be disregarding it for no reason, but will sure as hell not give it a second chance anytime soon. Manic Karts is a sequel to Super Karts and a bit better, but also much less known game. Same as most other kart games go, this one too does not focus on realism but on the fun factor. And it is. Fun, that is. It features more tracks than the original, 16 of them to be precise, better high-resolution SVGA graphics, well, if your system can handle it at speed that is, and a choice of 4 difficulty classes, from 50cc all the way to 250cc. So if you're a fan of a sport, Manic Karts can provide hours upon hours of racing goodness. As you play through your chosen engine power leagues, winning races, or losing, whatever, both are possible, you can work on improving your kart, adding to the feeling of progression and getting better. The tracks are all 3D, a simple 3D perhaps, but 3D nonetheless. And all the cards on them are 2D sprites, which is a bit disappointing given that they didn't have to be very complex models and a few simple polygons would do the job well, and would add a lot to the atmosphere of racing. Tracks, on the other hand, all have walls, which is beyond weird to me. I mean, I get that some may have this as it would fit to their theme, but a desert or a mountain ones? It's silly. I suppose it was made to either reduce the number of sidetrack objects or to keep you within their bounds. Whichever the reason, it's a bad game design choice and one I'd rather not see implemented. But whatever, it is what it is. Sadly, I'm not done complaining. Far from it actually. Which is a bit weird for me as I actually like Manic Karts, I just think that it could be much better. With just a few changes it could have been a well-known and popular game. Anyway, same as its predecessor, the game doesn't feature local split-screen multiplayer, which is a serious letdown as there's hardly any better game for split-screen than Karts. Any Nintendo owner can tell you that. And finally, the included track editor, which is rather limited in terms of its track creation capabilities, is not only disappointing in terms of features, but also very unergonomic, feeling like an afterthought and not a tool made for gamers to extend the life of the title with their own creations. Mega Phoenix is an extended and expanded version of an earlier game Phoenix and also a single-screen arcade shooter in vein of Galaga. If Galaga was not as varied and fun as it is. Oh man, I've spoiled it a little, haven't I? Oh well, same as in most similar games, your ship only moves left and right, and the enemies are arranged in patterns at the top, attacking periodically in waves, diving at you. First few stages see you fighting basic enemies, then you face few larger, Phoenix-like enemies, which for all intents and purposes are stronger versions of the basic ones. After that, there's the titular Mega Phoenix, which is a tough cookie to crack, and eventually the final boss in the form of an alien mothership. Or Phoenix ship, I should say, really. When all 5 stages are beaten, the game repeats them at increased difficulty. To aid you on your never-ending grind against the Phoenixes, you have a temporary shield and some basic weapon upgrades. There's not many of them, but they make the gameplay considerably easier. Mega Phoenix looks and sounds rather nice, and when you play it first, it lures you in with a promise of fun and action-packed gameplay. Sadly, most of it goes away quite quickly, as soon as you realize that the 5 stages are the only ones that you ever get to see in the game. And when you do, the repeatable nature of Mega Phoenix becomes unbearable and the monotony and boredom sets in. That is how I feel about it though, and you may disagree. Mega Phoenix is a cool title to play through once, against friends for points, and then to forget about for a decade or two, as there's just way too many great old and new games not to waste your time on this one. Mars 3D is probably the most unusual game of today's entire video. Not because it's better or weirder than anything else on showing, rather because of how it came to be. And it was created on Mars by a Mars rover in between picking of the Mars soil samples. It made it itself in its own image and programmed it in BASIC. All the previous sentences are naturally a lie. In fact, Mars 3D was developed in 1997 for Chinese market and in Chinese only. 21 years later, in 2018, it was fan-translated and released in the limited big box edition in the West. 21 years is a long time. So long in fact that DOS ceased to be a viable gaming platform over a decade before that. I know that all of it has nothing to do with the game itself, but I find it interesting, and also it's a contributing factor to Mars 3D's obscurity. Story-wise, you're Jet Hunter, incredibly cool named protagonist and the soon-to-be hero of the post-apocalyptic dystopian future world games set in. World that has been decimated and near entirely destroyed by the earlier nuclear war, seemingly started by the North American defense computer. But let's let past be past and focus on the present, which sees Jet working for the New Hope, a corporation that has risen from the ashes of the old to rebuild the civilization and planet better than it was before. A noble cause indeed. Anyway, one of those seemingly boring and samey days, your parents are brutally murdered by the authorities. A touchy subject, both in game and in real life, especially if you keep in mind where the game hails from and that there are still places in the world where this may be a common practice. So, angry, sad and most importantly furious, you decide to investigate. There is naturally more there to the plot than it initially meets the eye, as otherwise the game would not be called Mars 3D, but I'll let you discover it through the multiple included cutscenes in their cringe dialogues-filled storytelling. There are 9 differently looking and feeling weapons in the game, and they all appear to be quite unique and fun to run around with. The enemies are quite varied too, and the overall gameplay is pretty enjoyable, even if it feels old in its design. And I suppose it did the same in 1997 too, as Mars 3D is more similar to Doom than Duke Nukem 3D or Quake, meaning that it represents the first wave of FPSs rather than the latter ones. Either way, I think it's worth experiencing even today, just to see what we never got to play here in the West. Mick is a very fun mid-90s platformer in which you play as the titular protagonist. As you and your friend Masha were playing, you wandered into the mysterious forest next to your village, and it appears that it's also a home of a particularly evil and pesky witch. It seems that before Instagram and Twitter, X, people did not share information on mysterious haunted forests in their vicinities. I'd assume that living next to such place, everyone would knew that the witch was there, and she was generally speaking unpleasant to both look at and interact with, but clearly it was not the case. Maybe it was before the invention of Internet version 0.1 alpha, so village notice boards. Anyway, coming back to our story, the witch naturally jumps on you too, turns Masha into a tree and you into a ladybug and locks you away in her castle. And this is probably even weirder than you not knowing of her in the forest. I mean, ladybug is so easy to kill, why wouldn't she just get rid of you once and for all? And even if she didn't, why did she kept you? Have you ever seen a ladybug? They're the most boring creatures out there. Nothing to watch really. Ah well, it's her mistake and she'll learn it soon enough, as naturally you do not intend to stay an insect for much longer or leave the whole situation unresolved. So, you take it upon yourself to return to your original form, escape the castle, kill the witch and save Masha. Preferably in that order. Regaining your form will allow you to jump and climb ladders, and as far as I know, these are kinda crucial in all platformers. I'm sure that I don't have to tell you that. As you go about your adventure, slowly working on fulfilling your quest, you will also meet animals that the witch turned into various twisted freaks of nature. And you can help them regain their original shapes by using bottles of magic potions on them. Each freed animal, in return, will grant you a power to turn into its form. So, as you carry on, you should collect few of these before your final clash with the witch. All of these new powers will be useful in different circumstances, so for instance, a squirrel can jump across big distances, a mouse can fit in narrow openings, a frog can swim, and a tiger scares away monsters. There are a few more of them, and they all have their own use case scenarios. All that said, only humans can use ladders, and since there's quite a few of them, you'll be spending a lot of time as yourself. Sounds are rather basic but well-fitting, and the graphics, while only EGA, look pretty decent for the chip. Overall, if you like classic 1990s adventure platformers, there is a lot to love in Mick. Modem Wars was way ahead of its time when it released in 1989, and even more so when it originally dropped a year earlier on C64. It was made from ground up to be an online multiplayer real-time strategy. Yes, in the 80s no less. Sure, it can theoretically be played in single player in training mode, but it's far from the fun that it offers when played against someone else. So, as predominantly versus game for the two players, each of the opponents takes control of one army of robots consisting of 4 basic unit types. Grunts are your infantry, riders are cavalry, boomers are artillery, and spies are, well, spies. Other than that, both of you have your command centers that you can defend and in the same time compete to capture the one belonging to the enemy. Comsen is an unarmed mobile unit that can launch drones and missiles. First can be used for fast and far-off reconnaissance and also trigger remotely to explode. Kinda like we use drones now for warfare. So that was what, 35-ish years ahead of its time? Cool, right? Anyway, missiles can obviously be used as, well, missiles and target specific enemy units or drones. Come to think of it, given the presence of these two on your comsen, I'd like to retract my former statement of it being unarmed. But if you think that Modern Wars was done innovating, you're wrong. The terrain could be used to provide cover and allow for sneak attacks, or it could even slow enemy down too. So searching for best attack spots and choke points was a standard strategy in Modem Wars. And since you could only see what your units could see, going into enemy area and kiting them into a trap was also not an unseen approach. Especially that you could put your units into formations, they could duck themselves in or camouflage for defensive purposes or go into blitz mode for faster movement. The lack of variety in units was definitely made up for in tactical possibilities. So as you see, when I said that Modern Wars was ahead of its time, I really meant it. If it's so great, fun and deep, why is it then in an obscure DOS Games video, you may wonder? Well, the reason is twofold. For one, the AI in training mode is rather weak, and after a game or two poses literally no challenge. Secondly, given the Modem Wars multiplayer nature and the requirement to have a modem, which not many did in the 80s, the number of potential players, especially those into strategies, was really limited. All in all, if you're into RTSs and wanna see the one that's probably the first, check Modem Wars out. So, how did you like today's selection? Pretty wide, right? I wanted a nice spread of genres and fortunately it was possible. So, let me know what you think of the games in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. Smash them if you have to, it helps more than you could ever know. Also, I would like to thank you and all my amazing Patreon and YouTube members for helping this channel keep going. And last but definitely not least, I would like to thank all the wonderful folks who record and upload playthroughs, let's plays and other retro-centric videos here on YouTube, because they help to preserve the games that would have otherwise been long forgotten. So thank you.